Hi, my name is Kira O'Connor, and this is Reading Arizona. Hi, my name is Kira O'Connor, and this is Reading Arizona. I've been a reader for as long as I can remember, from reading picture books with my parents and eagerly checking out chapter books at school, to falling back in love with reading as an adult and joining a book club where I found friendship and community. Books bring people together, and that's what I want to bring you with Reading Arizona. I love reading romance, and right here in the Valley, we've got tons of great romance writers, from historical fiction romance, small town romance, and even some forced proximity. They've got it all. And these authors have some theories as to why happily ever afters keep you coming back.
Where it's about empowering yourself with confidence, with sexuality, with consent, with finding who you want to be and exploring those topics in a safe way with the promise that the book is going to have a happy ever after.
Jacqueline Snow knows her happily ever afters. She's written over 30 of them. Snow is a Valley-based author who writes sports and contemporary romance. She even wrote her first thriller in 2025 under the pen name L. Owens. What keeps Snow coming back to romance is the community and the joy she finds there, something she feels is often used against romance readers.
And there's nothing wrong with reading for joy. I don't know why reading romance specifically. People watch TV for joy. People watch movies. I don't know why reading romance is so scrutinized for bringing people joy.
As a longtime romance lover, this influx of romance readers, I think, can really be tied to the pandemic.
Historical romance writer Liana De La Rosa saw more readers joining the romance community during the pandemic, searching for a happily ever after between the pages of a book.
I think that romance has always been popular. It's always been, the part of publishing that paid everybody's checks, right? But I think that once the pandemic hit, people were staying home, and I think that people were looking for escapism. They were looking for a chance to, to travel from their own home, and books are such a lovely escape for that.
Since the discontinuation of the mass market paperback, historical romance has seen a dip in readers. But De La Rosa says romance as a whole has seen an increase in readers, largely since the pandemic.
The pandemic just ushered in this whole new readership of younger readers who are just really rabid for the escape and for their HEAs and for pushing the boundaries. And it's been really interesting to see. I wish more of them picked up historicals, but maybe that'll be next.
Oh my gosh, because I love love. I know that's the cheesiest answer.
Joining the ranks of Valley romance authors is Sarah Miller, whose debut novel, Until Then, came out in 2025. Miller says her favorite part of any romance book is the ability to see love in all forms, from romantic love to familial love to love of friends. She loves love.
That idea that you're going to get the love story, but you do have not necessarily high drama, but you've got the emotional aspects of things, but that you just kind of get sucked into the story and you still get that happily ever after, but not necessarily just between the couple. You have the friendships and the family aspects to it. So that's kind of why I love romance. I mean,
don't just take my word for it. You've heard from lots of folks today about why love stories are so important. But if you're looking for data, I've got that too. Meet Romancing the Data, one woman who's trying to quantify just how important love stories are for readers.
In a hard time looking for something that's a bit more uplifting, more positive about human connections.
After picking up reading again during the pandemic, Jane decided to combine her love for data with her rekindled love for romance reading. And Romancing the Data was born.
I think a lot of people during the pandemic were drawn to the genre. I think the central element of being considered a romance is that there's a central love story and there's a happily ever after, or an HEA as we call it. And so I think that's comforting because the world is kind of scary sometimes, and so it's nice knowing you can go through this ups and downs of the story, but you know it's going to be okay in the end.
One of Romancing the Data's claims to fame is the Romance Bookstore Directory. Featuring pop-up, online, and physical bookstores, the Romance Directory shows the growth of romance bookstores over time and just how many there are around the world today.
So yeah, but that growth over 2 years from 2022 to 2024 was 1,250% growth in stores. So from 4 stores to 65. So that's pretty big, especially in like a time when a lot of brick and mortar stores are closing. To see this plethora of new physical bookstores opening.
Have you ever gone to your favorite local bookstore and wondered, where are all the love stories? Well, 2 brand new bookstores in Arizona have you covered. Their romance sections aren't limited to just one shelf, it's the whole store. Here's a look at 2 romance-only bookstores right here in State 48.
Hi, I'm Chelsea.
Hi, I'm Brittany.
I'm Shelby.
I'm Marlene.
And we're friends to lovers.
We're so cute.
Have you ever wondered what it would be like if you ran a bookstore with your best friends? The co-owners of Friends to Lovers, Arizona's very first romance-only bookstore, can tell you. It's filled with love. Friends to Lovers is a pop-up bookstore that started in 2024 in Tucson.
I think all of us have had this conversation together many times because we're going out there and trying to do something really specific, right? Romance books. And so I think that for all of us, it has been this thing where reading has always had to be productive, right? But, Brittany a couple years ago, me a couple years ago, Chelsea and Marlene have been reading forever. Romance is something that was just genuinely enjoyable. Like, put aside the writing and anything else, this is just a good time. And so there's also been this community built around TikTok. It would be impossible to ignore as part of this conversation. And I think it's gotten a lot of people into reading romance specifically. And we really wanted to set out and create that environment, but in person.
Friends to Lovers say they hope to bring the positive experiences people have on Book Talk into the real world through their pop-up shops across southern Arizona.
With TikTok and social media and this like resurgence of reading and romance specifically, I was really intrigued, and it's what got me back into reading. And so again, I feel like that's a lot of our mission is it's gotten other people back into reading. We also want to provide a space that kind of offers that same experience for people. Maybe they're not on social media, but it's been huge for this.
Imagine a bookstore dedicated to romance. That's what you'll find at the Bookish Shop, a new bookstore open in Gilbert.
I think sometimes going to a bookstore where there's lots of different things, there's like almost like some sense of shame when you're going to the romance section. And so I just want to I want to take that away.
Bookish Shop owner Justine Woods says she wants every reader to feel comfortable at the Bookish Shop, especially romance readers.
Romance is a really freeing category, specifically for women, but for anybody. I think everybody could benefit from it. It adds a little like lightness in your heart, and you can find romance that is just funny. You can find romance that is going to make you just emotionally die on the inside and come back to life. And you can find romance that is like on the edge of your seat, like these warring nations, and people have a chance to be brave and show up for each other. And I think romance is just really dynamic in that it appeals to so many, and it can be so many people can see themselves in the books, which I think is really special.
Romance is a publishing powerhouse, but don't just take my word for it. I talked to booksellers about why people buy romance and gravitate toward love stories. Everyone comes to romance for a different reason. Changing Hands book buyer Ali Jasic says she sees readers coming to romance to find an escape.
For as much as, people are really trying to stay informed and stay up to date with really important topics, sometimes they need a little bit of a break from that. And so something like romance or like other genre fiction is great for, kind of keeping your mind up with reading and everything, but doing it with something a little lighter.
Bassick says the number of romance readers has only grown. The Tempe location of Changing Hands recently expanded its romance section, and still, romance books are flying off the shelves. But not every bookstore or every reader is a fan of romance, Jacek says.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who are totally not into romance. I mean, I've definitely even heard of like bookstore owners who don't even really carry much romance, so which is shocking to me because it sells so well. So I often hear, it's regressive for women and things like that, and we should be telling stories about women not just falling in love, and I completely agree with that. But I think there should always be a place for that kind of story too. I think there's enough shelf space for different kinds of storytelling for women, not just one type. So
Poison Pen in Scottsdale is known for its mystery, thriller, and suspense books. But bookseller John Charles says it isn't immune to the surge in popularity for romance
Mysteries
books.
have their day. And then romance, about 20 years ago, there was a big uptick in demand for it. You saw it through things like chick lit, and there was a big fantasy kind of paranormal romance surge then. And then it kind of goes away a little bit or downgrades, and then it comes back up about 5 years ago or so. A lot of people attribute it to the pandemic and people being kind of having to isolate themselves and be away from other human contact to a great degree, so they were looking for stories that brought hope.
Charles says that misconceptions for romance books are similar to any other genre, readers thinking all romance books are the same.
Because they are in a particular genre, because they follow a certain formula to a degree. I mean, in a mystery, something happens, you solve it, order is restored. In a romance, two people find each other, fall in love, have a happily ever after ending. That doesn't mean everyone is formulaic. Every author has their own unique voice, and that's how they tell their story. Also, there's this misperception that romances are all pretty much fluffy reads. And some are. I mean, that's great. If you want a book to laugh about or just something that's light to brighten your mood, romance has got you covered. But if you also want a romance that explores real world topics like cancer or dealing with mental illness or PSTD, there are romances that weave that into the story very well.
When people think of romance books, they see the colorful covers on TikTok or the bodice rippers from the 80s. But for children's book buyer Ali Sesmat, love stories come in all shapes and sizes, and for all age ranges.
Romance looks different for everybody, and I love that no matter who you are, whether you want the spice, whether you're ace, there is a story about romance. It can be platonic romance with friends. It can be this deep once in a generation love. It can be finding that once in a generation love and losing it. I think that humans are created for connection, and there's nothing more connecting than how we relate to each other and finding love with each other in whatever form that takes.
So the funny thing about romantasy is it's always been here. It's just now being categorized as romantasy.
Unless you've been hiding under a rock recently, chances are you've heard of romantasy. It's the term used to describe books that have both romance and fantasy elements in them. Valley-based author Maxim Martineau reads and writes romantasy, and she credits the genre's exploding popularity to interest online.
Actually having it branded as romantasy, largely because of Book Talk and Bookstagram, has really, in my opinion, helped bridge the gap between romance writers and romance readers and fantasy readers.
But what truly keeps readers coming back to Daggers and Dragons?
Because you have people who like fantasy elements getting a little bit of romance that's missing in a lot of traditional, like just straight up fantasy books. And you have romance readers who want like familiarity, an easy story, and a little bit of magic. And it kind of blends the two of those. And like, for example, Rebecca Yarros did a really good job at that, of creating this like very easy to step into world so that both romance readers and fantasy readers could jump on that. And that's, in my opinion, what's like sort of eschewing this into like, I don't know, astronomical proportions.
And that's this week's episode of Reading Arizona. Thanks to all of the booksellers, authors, and readers that made this week's storytelling possible. Stay tuned for next week and keep reading Arizona. Kira O'Connor, 12 News.